Morning all, Brian S. Pratt here. Going to read chapter 18 of Fires of Prophecy, book 2 of the Morcyth Saga. So, most of you probably realize now that I posted over on my Facebook fan page that I have a title for my fourth Travail book, Echoes of the Ancients. I've been debating whether between Echoes or Curse of the Ancients. But I think I'm leaning towards Echo, and I mentioned that on there, and most people seem to go with the Echoes, or Relic of the Ancients. Sorry, the name hasn't quite sunk in yet. So, yeah, still looking for an late August release on that. Hopefully. Alright, chapter 18, so Tanak's gone. We had a short interlude where the pit fighters got captured and James had to go rescue them, which really wasn't difficult. See, James is starting to come into his own with magic, and he's getting better at it. He gets really good by the end of the series. Anyway, here's chapter 18. That evening, when they stopped for the night, James took the midnight watch. He liked it for its peace and quiet, which gave him time to think about things. While on watch, he often went over the spells he'd done and tried to figure out how to make them better, such as the Bubble Seeker spell, used in locating Jerome the other night. This evening, he worked on spells that would be effective against another mage. His last two trials hadn't gone very well. The first one at the City of Light almost killed him and ended up devastating a wide area. He needed to devise spells that would be effective against the mage, yet not destroy everything in the surrounding area. The next time, he might be in a town with innocent people. Maybe a series of spells, small spells that built on each other to breach the mage's defense. Two things all mages needed in order to perform magic were concentration and power. Disturb either one, and his ability to do magic disappeared. A good mage's concentration would not be disrupted easily. Something profound or totally unexpected would be needed. James considered different methods that might work as he walked around the campsite, trying to stay awake until Stig's turn at watch. On his fourth trip around the camp, from off in the distance appeared two white lights, coming toward him. As they drew closer, a roar began to be heard as well. He was about to wake the others when he came to the shocked realization of just what approached. He stood with mouth slightly agape as a beat-up pickup came rolling into camp and pulled up with the passenger side next to him. James waited expectantly, but at first nothing happened. Then he saw the driver lean over to his side and open the door. Looking in, he saw the little creature with the felt hat sitting behind the steering wheel. "Get in," he said, motioning for James to enter the cab. He looked around at his sleeping friends. "I can't just leave them. I'm on watch. They'll be fine. Are you sure?" Giving James a look of annoyance, he said, "Get in." James climbed in the cab and shut the door. With a roar, the creature hit the gas and they drove away in the dark. He sat there as the truck rolled through the countryside. The creature turned on the radio and a George Strait song came on. "Where are we going?" "Going for pizza," the creature replied. "Pizza?" he asked. "There's pizza here?" "Just have to know where to look." The creature smiled as he continued down the road. "Road?" James looked and suddenly realized they were on a blacktop highway. Up ahead, he saw the lights of Spider just crawled across my screen. Don't you hate that? James looked and suddenly realized they were on a blacktop highway. Up ahead, he saw the lights of civilization approaching. There were not many buildings. The one closest to them had a sign out front that said Mama's Pizza. The creature pulled the truck into a parking spot outside Mama's Pizza and parked. Shutting the engine off, he got out. Before he closed the door, he looked back at James, who had remained in the cab. "Coming?" Yeah, James said, and got out of the truck. Theirs was the only vehicle in the parking lot out front of Mama's. The place looked a little run down, similar to what his grandfather would have called a greasy spoon. He joined the little creature where he waited at the door. The little creature opened the door and allowed James to enter first. Once inside, he gestured to a fat, dark-haired woman behind the counter. That's Mama. She looked over to them as they entered and gave them a big smile. It'll be ready in a few minutes, she said. The creature gave her a nod and then led James over to a table. Sorry, I'm tired this morning. An old TV was mounted to the wall over by Mama, who watched it with rapt attention. James was surprised to find her watching an old episode of Star Trek. She's a Trekkie, the creature explained. You should see her collection in the back room. James turned back to him and asked, So why are we here? For pizza, like I said, the creature replied. I wanted some and hate eating alone. It's better with someone who's able to enjoy it with you, wouldn't you say? I suppose, he said. James watched as the little creature took the salt shaker and poured a little bit of salt on the table. Using great care, he positioned the salt shaker on its edge within the salt pile, and then slowly removed his hands, leaving the salt shaker cocked to one side. He looked across the table to James with a satisfied smile. Not bad, eh? You sure don't act like a god. Never said I was. I just work for one, replied the creature as he continued to admire his accomplishment. See, is Igor a god? Is Igor not a god? That's been a question that a lot of people have asked me. I think I've answered it before, or at least I've answered what Igor has said before. But just because someone says something doesn't necessarily mean to be true. But is Igor a god? No, he's not. I'll just say that right now. He is not a god. He's something else. And Star Trek's, I'm not really a Trekkie, but for some reason Star Trek has come in and out of this series quite often, little bits and pieces here and there, and I don't know why. James isn't really a Trekkie. I'm not really a Trekkie. I enjoy Star Trek. I grew up with it, but why did I put it in here? I have no idea. It just came out. Mama went to the back and came out shortly with an extra large pepperoni pizza. She brought it over and placed it on the table between them, then fetched a pitcher of soda with 2 glasses. Enjoy, she said before returning to her show. Taking a big slice, the creature said, Go ahead and help yourself. James watched as he took an enormous bite. Sauce trickled down the side of his mouth. Grabbing a slice for himself, James took a bite and admitted to himself that this was very good pizza. This is the one where they have to recharge the dilithium crystals, Mama said from the counter. I love this one. The little creature continued to eat. James sat there quietly while he ate and pondered the ramifications behind why the creature had brought him there. Maybe it was for company, as he said, though James considered that highly unlikely. You're more talkative this time, he observed. That a problem? The little guy asked to a mouthful of pizza. James shook his head and said, No, I just thought you weren't supposed to answer questions. Can't you just relax and enjoy yourself, the creature said, a little annoyed. Okay, James replied. You never told me your name. It's true pronunciation you'd be unable to manage, he said. Just call me Igor. Igor? James asked, about ready to laugh. Yes. Actually, no, I think in this instance it's Igor. No, ever since Young Frankenstein, I can't see that without saying Igor. But it's supposed to be Igor. Yes, Igor, he replied, as in Dr. Frankenstein's assistant. All right, James said. Igor. They sat and ate the pizza. James was amazed at the speed with which Igor consumed each slice. He barely had 3 before Igor removed the last slice for himself. Giving out with a loud, satisfied belch, Igor sat back in his chair while James finished his last couple of bites. When the last bite entered his mouth, Igor stood. Shall we? James swallowed, then asked, We're leaving? Yes, it's time to take you back, replied Igor. Getting out, James took his glass and drained the rest of the soda before following Igor outside. Come back again, Mama said from behind the counter as they left. On the way back to the truck, Igor paused as he looked down at a mud puddle by his feet. James watched before entering the cab as he noticed him there. Bending over, Igor picked up something shiny out of the puddle and held it up for James to see. A nickel, he said happily. You never know what treasure you'll find, even in the dirtiest of places. That's true, I suppose, James said as he opened the cab door and got in the truck. Igor got in, started the motor, and backed out onto the road. Returning the way they came, who soon had the truck speeding into the night. They remained quiet until James asked, "Did Cassie have to die?" "Everyone dies, James," he said, glancing over to him. "It's just a matter of when." "But they were so happy together," James replied. "Couldn't they have had more time?" "Not for me to say." Soon, James saw the fire from their camp up ahead, and Igor brought in near the campfire. Looking out the window, he saw that everyone still slept. The roar of the truck motor hadn't even caused them to stir. "See you later," Igor said as he stopped and let James out. James opened the door and got out of the cab. Before shutting it, he paused, glanced back, and asked, "When?" "When it happens," Igor said with a smile. "Good luck," he said just before James closed the door. Then with the roar, the truck got going, and James watched until the tail lights disappeared into the night. James continued to watch as he pondered the meaning of these visits. Why does he keep showing up? Is it just for a visit like he said, or is there more to it? And Igor, what kind of name is that for a being like him? The pizza had been good, though, he thought as he belched, bringing forth reminiscence of pepperoni. He yawned and figured his time at watch was about over. Moving through the sleeping bodies to Stig, he woke him for his turn. Okay, so why this whole Mama's Pizza thing? Aside from the fact I love pepperoni pizza. That's my go-to. From a round table, I might do the gourmet chicken garlic, which I think is perhaps the best pizza in the entire world. And round table, I think is overall the best pizza. I mean, even the crust. I just like eating the crust just by itself, just because it's round table crust. That's how good it is. But two things maybe people should have gotten out of this, but maybe not. A, recharging dilithium crystals. Igor has planted the seed in James's mind of recharging crystals with magic. Second, finding the nickel. Finding treasures in the dirtiest places. So some places you can find treasures. You can find things you need. So Star of Morcyth, maybe. You know, there. Who knows, right? The fire. Anyway, so he's dropping these kernels of information because a being like him or a god, they have to do things in a certain way, and at least I believe so. They can't just say, "Do this." They have to start a series of events in motion that will have a high rate of probability of enabling the person to do what they need them to do. Like in order to do what he needed to do by the end of the Mist of Sorrow, he needed to find things, and he needed to have a lot of power. I mean, at the end, maybe not so much, but along the way he did. And that power, you know, if he said just do crystals, then from that point on, he would have been hunting for crystals. He would have been, it would have altered everything else that had already, you know, it would have altered his path and wouldn't have led him probably to the end. But by doing this, there was a high rate of probability that he would get to the end in better condition to do what needed to be done. Does that make any sense? So, yeah. So Igor does these things that the plant kernels of ideas in James's head that when the time is right will make sense. Like Gandalf, right? I mean, how many times do you watch the old shows with the old wise person who says something that makes no sense, irritates everyone who hears it, but ultimately makes perfect sense and had to be said? Well, that's what Igor's doing, but in different ways, I guess. All right, continuing. In the morning when he woke with the dawn, he went to where the truck had been and wasn't too surprised when he found no tire tracks in the dirt. Shaking his head, he joined the others in preparing the caravan to get underway. It was not long before they were once again on the road. headed southwest along the river. Throughout the day, as they continued down the road, they came across little hamlets and villages with increasing frequency. At one point, they had to pull over for a long column of soldiers on their way north. Must be heading to Matic, Yorn said, commenting to Jerome as they watched them pass. Probably, stated Jerome. Hope they get cut to pieces, he said, barely above a whisper. Several heads nodded in agreement. Once the column passed, they were able to bring their wagons back onto the road and continued on their way. The amount of traffic slowly increased as the day progressed, and soon James could smell the familiar scent of the sea. We're getting close to the ocean. Azak, the Empire's capital, is on the ocean, Roland said. Must be getting close to it then. After another mile, the great city of Azak came into view. Larger than any city they had yet seen, it sprawled along the river for over a mile before it met the ocean. A large wall surrounded the city, stretching miles in both directions down the coastline. Upon the water beyond the city were dozens of ships tied to the long line of docks. More were out upon the water, some leaving and some preparing to dock. This place is massive. Unbelievable, he heard someone mutter from behind. Hopefully we can get in and quickly find where Miko is, then be on our way, Jerome said. James, Dilly said, it looks like there was a place for caravans to the north of the city. Looking to where she indicated, he saw the caravansary and turned to head in that direction. At the caravansary, an official-looking man, flanked by 2 guards, came forward to greet them. Welcome to Azak, strangers, he said. If you could show me your letter of travel. James took it out and offered it to him. The official looked at it, saw the name, and sealed the bottom, and then returned it to him. There's a tax of 3 coppers per wagon. Taking the coins from his pouch, James handed them over. Thank you, the official said. Find any place you would like to set up camp. He then turned and walked back to a tent set up along the road to the caravansary. They found a good spot near the river. Delia took Roland with her to deliver several packages that were marked for there. She took Scar and Potbelly along as well. You be careful, James warned her. If there is any place we're most likely to be discovered, it's here. Don't fret, she assured him. I'll be in and out fast. James watched as he drove the wagon into Azak, worried about the what-ifs and maybes that ran through his mind. After they were settled in, James took out his mirror and tried to locate Miko. Jerome and Tersa came over and sat by him as he made the attempt. They looked at the mirror and watched as Michael's face began to appear. As he broadened the scope, they discovered that he still rode in a wagon. As he expanded the scene even farther, they were able to see a large expanse of ocean to his right. So, he's still following the coast south? Tersa reasoned. It looks like it, agreed James. At least he's alive and appears to be doing okay. As long as he's not dead yet, there's still hope, Jerome added. That's right, he said. Let's get Delia's deliveries done and get the heck out of here. Sid came over and asked, do you think we might be able to go in and have a drink? James just looked at him. After the last time, I don't think so. We'll be careful. No, James told him. Not here. Down the road maybe, but not here. Too dangerous. James is right, Jerome said. Disappointed, Stig went back to his fellows and broke the news to them. Jerome and James heard groans coming from them as he told them his reply. Let them go on to Benner at the seat of the enemy's power. He would have been mad to have allowed it. 1 second. Alright. 3 hours later, when the daylight began to fade, Delia had yet to return. James had paced anxiously the last hour, dread growing with every passing minute. Something's wrong, he told Jerome when he came to stop next to him. Not necessarily, she said. She's been gone longer than this before. If she waited much longer, she may run the risk of having the gates closed on her, James said. Do the games close here at night? Jerome asked. I don't know, but there's always a chance. What should we do? He asked. Let's find her, James suggested. Good, I'm tired of sitting here. What about the rest of us? Tersa asked nervously. Just stay here with them, James said, indicating Stig and the others, and we'll be back as soon as we find her. He then went over and explained to them what he and Jerome were about to do and walked toward the gates. We don't even speak the language, Jerome said. Hopefully that won't be a problem, James told him. I've seen many northerners here, so hopefully we won't stick out too much. Where are we going to start looking? James asked before they reached the gate. Not sure. At the gate, they were scrutinized by the guards, but other than that cursory examination, were allowed to pass. Going to do that bubble thing again? Jerome asked. Maybe, he said. I really should change this so he uses his mirror. Why doesn't he use his mirror? Are you all thinking the same thing I am? Yeah. Anyway, it's what it is, right? Even the smartest people sometimes have brain farts, I guess they call it. Maybe, he said. Let's look around first through the merchant's district and see if we can't locate them that way. He felt a tingling sensation and looked around. Sure enough, he saw a mage walking through the crowd on the street. He pointed him out to Jerome as he pulled him closer and whispered, "He's doing magic of some sort. I can feel it." Considering that fact for a second, he whispered back to James, Will they be able to sense you doing magic? James nodded. It would stand to reason that if I can sense them when they work magic, then they could sense me. Then maybe we shouldn't do the bubble thing. Only if we have to, James replied. They walked through the streets looking for any sign of Delia and the others. They passed many merchants' establishments, but failed to find any clue as to their whereabouts. By this time, it had grown fairly dark, and they saw two people with long poles, each with a flame at the end, walking the streets. They went from street lamp to street lamp, lighting them to give people on the street light to see by. This is hopeless, Jerome exclaimed. They could be anywhere. I agree. We'll never find them this way. The city is just too large. James led Jerome into an empty side alley where he took out his mirror and began concentrating on Delia. Her features began to form. Jerome gasped when they saw her sitting on the floor in a small room. The others were there with her, and the look on their faces told them they were not happy. They're in trouble, said Jerome. It would appear so, James replied. I told her to be careful. He expanded the view, hoping to see where they were being kept, until finally managing to get a bird's eye view of the estate wherein she was being held. He tried to expand it even farther when Jerome touched his arm and whispered, Mage. Okay, James told her to be careful. Are people more careful if someone says be careful? I don't think so. It's like drive safely. Well, people are going to drive that we're going to drive. It's not. People feel the need to say that, but I don't think it really affects any outcome at all. James looked out of the alley to the street where he saw a brown robe walking toward the alley entrance. He stopped the spell, and immediately the mage paused, turning his head first one way and then the other. It seemed like he was searching, trying to rediscover the source of the magic. James and Jerome held their breath and remained pressed against the side of the alley as they watched the mage in the street. He finally turned and walked off to the right. He knew you were doing magic, Jerome whispered. Apparently so, James replied, and stuck his head out the alley to watch the mage continue down the street away from them. Let's go, he said. I got a pretty good look at where they were being kept. It's a large estate with plenty of ground surrounding it. Sounds like someone important, Jerome reasoned, or rich. Stepping out of the alley, they followed the street as it moved closer to the river and the castle. Estates of that size were most likely to be located in that area, hopefully. Well, that stands to reason. Rich people, important people, high nobility type people, they would want to be close to the seat of power, and so their estates would be closest to the castle. They proceeded for a few more blocks before coming to the inner wall. A single gate stood open with 2 guards. Didn't look as if they are stopping anyone, James said hopefully. Maybe it's because they know them? Stretching, James said. Only one way to know for sure. He stepped out, followed closely by Jerome, and walked toward the gate, heart beating rapidly in anticipation of a confrontation. The guards saw them approach, but didn't stop or question them as they passed through. Once through to the other side, James breathed a sigh of relief. They continued down the street, now in a much more affluent section of town. Not too far past the gate, they came to where the street split. One section continued on toward the keep, and the other moved away from the keep along the wall toward several estates in the distance. James glanced at Jerome and indicated the area away from the keep. When Jerome nodded in agreement, they turned to follow that street. Which one is it? Jerome asked after they entered the area with the estates. I'm not sure, he replied as they continued down the street. Then on a hill off to their left, he saw the estate that had been in the mirror. That's it, he exclaimed, pointing out to Jerome. Are you sure? Absolutely. The estate had a stone wall around its perimeter, with but a single gate for entrance. The gate had a well-lit guardhouse with a guard keeping watch. The area between the wall and the house was fairly clear except for a small garden area. Let's check around back and see if there is a better spot to try and gain entry. James nodded and followed him around the outside of the wall. It doesn't seem to be guarded, said Jerome suspiciously. We're in the heart of the Empire. Who would be dumb enough to break into a noble's estate here? You may be right, Jerome agreed. He moved closer to the wall and jumped, grabbing the top as he pulled himself up, and then scanned the area on the other side for guards. See anything? No, it looks clear, Joe replied. Reaching down, he said, Give me your hand. James took his hand, and Jerome pulled him to the top of the wall. They quickly dropped down to the other side and squatted in the shadows. The area between the wall and the manor house was dark, and they didn't see anything move. With Jerome in the lead, they made their way across the open lawn to the side of the house near a darkened window. Jerome peered inside, but couldn't make anything out in the dark. With great caution, he tested the window and found it locked. Taking one of his knives, he slid the blade in the narrow space between the two sides and lifted the latch. Replacing his knife in his belt, he pulled the window open and slipped inside. He helped James in, then closed it once again. Jerome searched in the dark, trying to locate the door, when a soft glow filled the room. Looking back, he saw James with the glowing orb in his hand. The orb barely gave off any light, just enough to enable them to make out the details of the room. Thanks, Jerome whispered. Grinning, James replied quietly, No problem. They were in a study with but a single door leading out. Jerome crossed the room and placed his ear against the door, listening for any sound coming from the other side. After a moment, he shook his head and said, Nothing. Good, James said. Jerome slowly opened the door and then shut it again quietly as he turned to James. They're not going to come looking for magic because of that, are they? He whispered, pointing to the glowing orb in James's hand. I wouldn't think so, he replied. It's hardly using any magic at all. With a brief nod, Jerome again opened the door. James canceled the orb and it disappeared as Jerome opened the door wider. He glanced down the hallway to either side. A moment later, he turned back to James. In a barely audible whisper, said, There's a light down to the right. To the left is dark. Try the left? Jerome nodded, and then he again checked the hallway. Not seeing anyone, he opened the door wider and silently exited the room, making his way down toward the left. Once out of the room, James followed and then closed the door behind him. Muffled voices came from the room down the hallway to the right, where the light emanated, but was too far away to be able to make any of it out. Jerome stayed to the left side of the hallway as he quickly made his way down to the next door on the right. He paused a moment as he listened. Not hearing anything, he proceeded down the hallway. They passed two doors facing each other, and after a moment's listening at each, Jerome continued past. A little ahead, light emanated from around the corner where the hallway turned to the right. Jerome turned to James and whispered, Wait here. James nodded and then watched as Jerome silently walked to the turn and peered around it. After only a brief look, he brought his head back quickly and then motioned James closer. There's a guard standing in the hallway about 10 feet down. There's a torch on the wall near him. Should we take him out? If we do, we may alert everyone that we're here, Jerome replied. He may not even be guarding Dilly and the others. Can't think of any other reason to post a guard in a hallway, reasoned James. I say we got to do it. Can you do it? Jerome asked. I would need to be closer to take him out before he raised the alarm. Yeah, James replied, not liking the fact of having to kill someone in this manner, but what choice did he have? He removed the slug from his belt and silently went to the corner and peered around. Seeing the guard, he gathered his thoughts before stepping into the hallway. Before the guard even realized he was there, he released the magic and threw. The slug flew straight and true, striking him in the head. The guard sagged unconscious to the floor. Come on, James said to Jerome as he hurried to the guard. Apparently, James didn't use full magic on that one. The slug flew. He's not dead, Jerome exclaimed when he realized the guard was only unconscious. A sizable goose egg of a bump showed where the slug had struck. I held back a little, James admitted. I didn't want to kill him. The guard had been standing in front of stairs leading down. Let's put him in one of the rooms we passed, Jerome suggested. All right. They lifted him off the floor and carried him back to the corner where they paused a moment for Jerome to peer down the hallway. Seeing the coast was clear, they went to the first door on the right and opened it slowly. It was an empty bedroom and it didn't look as if it had been used for some time. They deposited the guard on the bed and then bound and gagged him. Once the guard was secured, James returned to the door and opened a crack, making sure the hallway remained empty. Finding that it was, they left the room, closing the door behind them. They returned to the stairs, where Jerome took the lead as they descended to the lower level. There they found a door that was slightly ajar. Jerome opened it further and peered through to the other side, where an empty corridor led away from the door. He motioned for James to follow. Following the corridor with James right behind, they passed two other closed doors on their way, pausing momentarily to listen to each. Not hearing anything, he continued down to the door at the end, where light could be seen coming through the cracks from the other side. As they drew near, they heard voices from the other side. "Tell me," one yelled, and then came the sound of someone being slapped hard. "Again," the voice said, and then another slap, followed by a female crying out in pain. "Delia!" Jerome cried as he raced for it. James ready to slug as Jerome hit the door with his shoulder, knocking it open. It slammed hard against the wall, startling everyone within. With both knives ready, he quickly surveyed the room. It took but a moment to realize what had been happening. Roland, Scar, and Potbelly sat to one side, hands chained to the wall. Delia lay stretched, spread-eagled upon a table, her hands and feet secured with ropes to the corners. A well-dressed man stood next to the table with another whom James could only believe was a dealer in pain. They had been torturing her. Two guards sprang into action and immediately drew their swords as they moved to engage Jerome. "Jerome!" Potbelly cried out from where he sat against the wall. The two guards closed with Jerome, one falling when a slug struck him in the face and blasting out the back. Out the back of his head. Yeah. Jerome parried a thrust from the other guard with one knife and then struck out with his other blade, catching the guard in the neck, severing the jugular. Grabbing his neck, the guard tried to stop the blood spewing forth as he stumbled and fell to the floor. Jerome kicked at the guard on his way down and heard a snap and the man's neck broke. The well-dressed man had a sword out with edge lying across Delia's throat. "Enough!" he cried, "or she's dead." Jerome stood there, seething with impotent rage, unable to do aught else. He stopped. James saw a ring of keys on one of the guards and reached down to pick them up when the well-dressed man says, "Don't, or she dies." "It seems we're in a pickle here," James told him as he straightened back up. "We're not about to leave without them," he said as he gestured to Delia and the others. "And if you cut her throat, you're a dead man." He stood with his sword at his throat, considering the situations. The torturer next to him said with authority, "You dare not hurt the High Lord Saitak. He is the right hand to the Emperor himself." "Shut up, you fool!" Lord Saitak yelled. Turning back to James and Jerome, he said, "You two, get over there next to the others." He nodded his head, indicating where Scar, Potbelly, and Roland sat. He menaced Delia with his sword until they began moving. Delia watched them, fear of the sword at her throat preventing her from doing or saying anything. "James," Jerome said quietly as they moved closer to where the others sat, "do something. I'm working on it. Go get Kirsch and Pearl." He's Lord Saitak. Yeah, I gotta say Lord Saitak there. Hang on. Lord Saitak said to the torturer, who then headed quickly for the door. James concentrated on Delia's exposed neck and then released the magic. "Go ahead," he said to Jerome. "He can't hurt her now." Trusting in James, Jerome was up in a flash and rushed Lord Saitak. The torturer broke into a run as he raced to the door and screamed for help. Lord Saitak ran his sword across Delia's throat, but it only slid along an invisible barrier that now encased her throat. Shocked at seeing the ineffectiveness of his sword, he turned to Jerome and prepared to defend himself. Okay, now I'm pretty sure that was the first moment where James did a protective shield, which obviously becomes part and parcel of magical tricks, right? And he's gotten pretty good with that, and it's done so many things. So, but yeah, I believe that was the very first time he did a shield spell. "We need him alive," James said. "We'll never make it out without him." With a slight nod, Jerome closed with Lord Saitak. Deflecting a thrust with one knife, he struck out with the other, but Lord Saitak danced backward and the knife missed by inches. The battle was joined. James got the keys from the dead guard and freed Scar. "Thanks, James," Potbelly said. We were hoping you might show up." "Yeah, man," Scar said, rubbing his wrist. He gave Scar the keys and removed the other's shackles before going over to Delia. He took out his knife and cut through her bonds. He helped her to her feet just as Roland came to assist. Delia stood, a little bit shaky, and James asked, "Are you all right?" "I'll be fine," she assured him. Scar and Potbelly had taken the guard's sword and stood by the door to keep a lookout. Scar turned back to the others and cried, "We've got company!" Suddenly, a crash, and James looked over to see Lord Cytok's sword lying on the ground and Jerome with his knife to his throat. "Tell your men to drop their weapons and come inside," Jerome ordered. A man from the hallway hollered something to Lord Cytok. Jerome pressed the point of his dagger into Lord Cytok's throat and said, "One of us understands your language, so don't do anything stupid." He hollered back to his men. Jerome looked to Roland and asked, "Did he tell them to drop their weapons?" Roland shook his head and replied. They asked if he was okay, and he told them he's okay, but held at knife point. "Tell them to drop their weapons and come inside. Now," Jerome insisted, as a drop of blood welled from where the knife's point had punctured the skin. Lord Cytok hollered to his men, and James glanced to Roland, who nodded. Soon they heard weapons falling to the ground, and then his men, 4 of them, stepped into the room. The torturer wasn't among them. "Where's the other guy?" Jerome demanded. Roland asked, and when one of the men replied, Lord Cytok began laughing. "What's so funny?" Jerome asked. "He's gone to raise the alarm. Soon this area will be swarming with soldiers." With a satisfied smirk on his face, he stared at James. "We'll never make it out," Potbelly exclaimed. "Maybe," said James, "if we're fast enough." "Secure them to the wall," James told Scar and Potbelly, who took Lord Cytok's guards and placed them in the chains that had once been theirs. "Gag them, too." "Right," Scar said, as he picked up the dirtiest and most disgusting rags available, taking great pleasure in stuffing them in their mouths. "Now, my lord," James said to Lord Cytok, "I hate to ask, but please lie down on the table." "Never!" he said adamantly. Once Scar and Potbelly had the guard secured, they came and forced Lord Cytok on the table, securing his arms and legs to the restraints. "Use a cleaner rag for his gag," James told them. "After all, he is a lord." Once he was secured and gagged, James said, "You 3 go on up and see what's going on while Roland and I help Delia up the stairs." "I can walk," she said as Jerome, Scar, and Potbelly ran down the hallway and up the stairs. Roland put one of her arms across his shoulders. Despite her assertion that she could walk, her legs remained a little unsteady. With James in the lead, they made their way to the stairs. At the top, they found Jerome racing back toward them. "Nothing yet," he said. "Good," said James as they continued down the hallway, going back the way they had come. Moving past the room where they saw the light earlier, James noticed it was now empty. Most likely, whoever had been in there was now back in the room with Lord Cytok chained to the wall. A little farther past the room, the hallway opened up onto the foyer, where they found Scar and Potbelly looking out the front door. Scar turned at their approach. "It's quiet out there." "Then let's move," Jerome urged as they left the house and ran toward the gate. The guard that had been there earlier was absent. Potbelly reached the gate first and opened it. He moved to the other side, scanning the vicinity. Not finding anyone, he motioned for the others to follow. They ran, making their way down the road a short ways before a large group of armed men appeared running toward Lord Cytok's estate. They ducked down a side alley and remained motionless as they waited for them to race past. Several brown robes could be seen among the running soldiers. "Mages," James said once they passed. "How are we going to get out of here now?" "I don't know," Scar replied, "but we better hurry before it's too late." Jerome looked out on the street and saw the way the soldiers had come to be, and saw that the way the soldiers had come was clear for the moment. Jerome looked out on the street and saw that the way the soldiers had come was clear for the moment. They stepped from the alley and raced away from Lord Cytok's estate, hoping to escape the city before it was too late. And that's 18. So, getting interesting. Delia obviously was not careful enough. And they got captured again. It seems like all I ever do in these books is rescue people. Well, at least the first couple. But that's because James really isn't into his power yet. They're not into their, they haven't got certain habits formed yet. And Delia, well, town after town, she walked in brazenly with packages, delivered them, no problem, right? And every time she did it with no problem, confidence grew. And when confidence grows, your wariness diminishes. And so she got burned. But James was there to save everybody, of course. So chapter 19, the escape from Azak. That's a good chapter. I had great fun writing these. I had a lot of fighting. I mean, I think my books have more body counts than John Wick. especially 6, man. 6 got a whole bunch. James, he doesn't want to kill. He can kill. I mean, he can kill very easily. Given the certain circumstances, he has no qualms about killing. But murdering, that's where he draws the line. He just doesn't want to murder, because he knows that every time you murder somebody, it's easier the next time to do it. Easier to rationalize it the next time he does it. So he really doesn't want to. However, I've come to realize that if someone's going to kill you, you just got to take them out, because if you leave them behind, you'll have to fight the fight again a second time. So, and in a situation like that where it was either where Lord Saitak was menacing Delia and says, drop your weapons and get over the other guys, right? Well, if they surrender, then they're all dead. Better to sacrifice one person and take him out than everybody die. That's kind of callous, but I don't want to see you dead, so I'm going to give the bad guys my weapons. I'll let them tie me up, and then I'll watch them kill you, and then they'll come after me. I mean, if that person's going to die anyway, may as well make that person pay for it, and everyone else there, save them. So I don't think I'd ever do that. Of course, I can say all I want to now. When you're in the moment, then all bets are off, and you're going to do what you're going to do. So, chapter 19 tomorrow. Travail 4. Relic of the Ancients. Progressing very nicely. I'm very happy with the progression. For a while, I was writing was really hard for me the past several months, and I was writing, but it just wasn't much, and my heart just really wasn't into it for a while. But all of a sudden, man, boom! I've gotten to a good part. A lot of my problem is when I'm writing, I will know that the next thing I'm writing about is going to be difficult, and I haven't quite figured out how to do it, and so I stall getting to that point, because I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to be able to figure it out. But I know if I just type, it just comes to me, and most times I can't figure things out ahead of time. I just got to write and just keep writing until the words fall right, and boom, I'm through. It's like it's like you're walking down a hallway and there's a cave in. You don't want to dig through the cave in, but you have to. But you're finding every reason not to dig through the cave in, and then you finally dig through the cave in, and then you boom, and then you're fine. And that's kind of like what I'm doing now. I'm trying not to let the cave in stop me. And but I'm totally focused to get this other book done in time. And if I keep that going, I could probably do 4 or 5 books a year. Yeah, we'll see how well that works out. But I'm trying not to get burnt out either. I've done that before. When I wrote Shepherd's Quest, I wrote that in 5 weeks, and I totally burned myself out. I was doing like 7,000 words a day. I was on fire. I couldn't stop writing. I wanted to write, and I was just so engaged. But after that, Hunter the Horror took forever to write, and every book after that's gotten longer. So I don't want to write too much at any one time or any one day. Just keep it going. Well, 44 minutes. I better stop rambling and sum this up. So, all right, chapter 19 tomorrow. The Escape from Azak, which, as you guys know, is pretty exciting. And I'll talk to you then.